Final Fantasy VII is regarded as one of the most popular, successful Final Fantasy games of all time. But did you know that the release and the printing of this game was a hot mess? If there was something on the game, the case, anything about it, it was probably printed wrong at some point in the process. Over the years, I've kind of accumulated this weird collection of copies of Final Fantasy VII, be they normal or just completely wacky, be they common misprints or rare, and just knowledge about these different variations. And I thought it'd be really cool if I took the time, made a video, and just shared my collection with you all and kind of got to share some of this knowledge around, because some of them I don't think people are very aware of. So to go into the intricacies of these misprints, I think the best place for us to start would be with a nice, normal, vanilla copy of Final Fantasy VII with nothing wrong with it. So this is your normal copy of Final Fantasy VII. It's a greatest hits copy, but it'll work none the same for a perfectly normal copy. See, on the front, we have Cloud, and on the back, we have our stuff. We can see all the text. It looks all normal, all as it should be. We can see our rating. It is T for teen, for cosmic mischief, mild animated violence, and mild language. All right, now if we break it on open to the inside, we have our discs. Now, Final Fantasy VII is a 3-disc game, and one of the things with the discs of the game, it's very difficult to see on the greatest hits disc. The greatest hits discs are silver, reflective. The Black Label games are white discs, but they have little symbols behind. It's unbelievably difficult to see. You can see it's Cloud on the Chocobo there, behind the numbers on the discs. So disc 1 is Cloud riding on the Chocobo. Without the disc in the game, you can see we have the instruction booklet. It makes a flush art with the inner cover of the front to make Aerith looking at the airship. Put that back in. Now if we go to the back side, there's our disc 2 and 3. We can take a look here at disc 2. Again, stupidly difficult to see on the greatest hits ones, but it is the High Wind is behind disc 2. Again, stupidly, annoyingly difficult to see on greatest hits. And on disc 3, it is the Meteor that is behind. That one you can actually kind of see. It is the Meteor behind disc 3. That's the same on all the discs. Is that it's Chocobo, Airship, Meteor. And then, with the discs removed, you get to see Sephiroth walking through the flames on the back cover. So that is a normal, as it should be, copy of Final Fantasy VII. Now, it may seem weird, and it may seem like I got into a little too many specifics when it came to that normal copy of Final Fantasy VII, but trust me that it'll all come back in some way or another in one of these copies of the game. But let's get into some misprint variants, all right? And what better way, I think, to start it than go with the most known and most common variant of misprint of Final Fantasy VII, which is the floating eye copy. So this is the most common misprint variant of Final Fantasy VII. If there's one you've heard of, it's probably this one, the disjointed eye. And what it is if we go into the back here, right where my thumb is, you can see the eye in the word masterpiece is just completely out of place. No idea how that managed to happen, but it's there. It just kind of floats out there. But other than the eye, this is your pretty standard Black Label copy of Final Fantasy VII. So you can see, versus the other one we looked at, we have our white discs. You can really get to see now the silhouettes behind the disc numbers. So you can see Cloud riding the Chocobo here. Much clearer. Without the disc, there's still Aerith looking at the High Wind. And then if we go to the back, you can see our disc 2 with the Highwind behind it, and our disc 3 with the Meteor behind it. So yeah, these are very common. You see these everywhere. I always joke with people that you are less likely to find, it's probably rarer to find a non-messed up Black Label Final Fantasy VII than one of these. So never let anybody tell you that these are like super rare and worth a ton more, because I honestly think they're more common than normal ones. So something I love about these copies of Final Fantasy VII, you'll notice as we go through them, is it's just so funny watching that it's like everything's fine but this one thing, and then they fix it and then somehow something else goes wrong, and then they fix it and then something else goes wrong, and it's just this never-ending battle where like they just never seem to be able to get it right. But yeah, so that was a very common copy we'll go over, and the next one is also pretty common. I'd say kind of equal level. I see them around probably just as much. It's just a little less well known. So we're back to greatest hits copies of the game. So we're gonna take a look at this here. Everything looks fine and normal from the front. From the back, we'll take a look at everything. We'll take a look. We have Fix the word masterpiece. I'm glad we sorted that one out. We're still rated teen for the same reasons. This just looks like a nice solid copy of Final Fantasy VII. The interesting part comes in when we open this boy up. So we'll open this game up. Now, if you've been paying attention, you may understand already why this copy is messed up. So we're gonna look behind disc 1. You know, we have our airship art right here. So behind disc 1 should be Aerith, and oh my god, we got Sephiroth. Sephiroth has killed Aerith and has taken the place on the front cover. Now you may think, okay, so did they put Aerith on the back cover? Nope, more Sephiroth. So this is what is called the double Sephiroth misprint. Sephiroth is supposed to be on the inner art of the back art, but somehow they printed the front cover with the wrong back art. So both sides of the case have Sephiroth on them, whereas it's supposed to usually look like that. That's the back of the instruction booklet. So it does lead to some interesting looking case art when you open it up. These are still fairly common. You do see them around from time to time. Not as common as the Masterpiece misprints, but they're out there, pretty readily available to find. This is kind of opposite to the previous one. This is a misprint that seems to only happen on the greatest hits copies of the game. So now we're going to get into some of the more rarer and interesting copies that I own of Final Fantasy VII. But before we get into it, I do want to kind of talk about some of the more, we'll call them honorable mentions. Some of the either copies that I haven't seen firsthand yet, an actual physical proof of them, or ones that just I didn't think were interesting enough to collect. Starting with, there are versions out there where apparently, I mean, they have happened that the back label of the game is Black Label and the front one is green. You can tell on the side, the spine of the game, one will be green, one will be black. There have been sealed copies out there showing that, so like it is a legit misprint. I'm not a huge fan of like collecting it, because technically you could just like put that together yourself. You could just go get a greatest hits copy and a Black Label copy and just swap the labels out. So like I was like, unless you have a sealed copy, it's kind of there are ones with various manual errors. Some have pages stapled in wrong. Some have two covers on the front of them. Again, another one that I'm like, it's okay, but I guess you could technically just make it yourself. The one that I have only heard of, and like, if you've ever seen it or have it or whatever, I would love to see it, is apparently I've heard that there is like a copy or copies out there where the discs all look fine. They look like Final Fantasy VII discs, but disc 3 plays SpongeBob Super Sponge. I haven't seen it yet. I've only heard of it in passing, but I would love to see that one day because that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So now that we got through some of those, I love them so much. Let's get into some of these more niche, cooler copies of Final Fantasy VII that I have. So here's our next copy of Final Fantasy VII, and it is a Black Label game. We can see on the back, it is Black Label, but the word masterpiece is normal. So the disjointed I is not reserved to every Black Label game. Some just, it didn't happen on. Now the first thing I'd like to point out is, you may have been wondering why I've pointed it out on every single game. This one's rated teen for realistic violence. On some copies of the game, they rated the game incorrectly. So this one has the realistic violence on it, unlike the other ones where they actually have multiple criteria on them as to why it's rated teen. Not sure why some copies of the game only have realistic violence, but some do, and this is one of them. Now, the next interesting part, the real interesting part about this is the inside, and we're gonna look at the discs specifically. These ones get really obscure, and I love these. These are so goofy. So when you look inside, as you can see, our Black Label game, our inner art is back to normal. We have our white discs. Cloud on the chocobo behind the disc. Everything looks great here. Now, Sephiroth on the back. Looks normal to me. We look. It was a jump scare. I just pulled that thing in there. We've got the meteor sitting behind disc 3. Disc 2 is where it's messed up. Let's pull this out. Disc 2 is supposed to have the high wind behind it, but this one has the meteor behind it. Now these ones are a lot less common than the first two we talked about. I think mostly I've seen them referred to online as the double meteor variants. It is where your disc 2 and 3 both have the meteor icon behind the disc number. Like I said, I don't see these around very often. I watch on eBay from time to time, and I find these ones to be pretty rare. It's very obscure, but I think it's just super interesting how they managed to have that happen. All right, so here's our Black Label copy of Final Fantasy VII. If I didn't have all these interesting little tidbits and misprints to point out, you'd think I just pulled the same game off the shelf 5 times, but they keep showing up at my doorstep. I don't know what to do. So we have our Black Label game. On the back, we can see masterpiece, fixed, teen, realistic violence. I don't know, but this is another one. Realistic violence versus the comic mischief and all the other nonsense. This is another one that the meat of the misprint is on the inside. So let's check out the innards. Same deal. Aerith, airship. Disc 1, white discs. Cloud behind the disc number. Now, this one is very odd. Let me spin this the right way. I'm just gonna set this here for a second and let you see if you can see it. So what is different about this copy in particular is disc 3. You can see right where my finger's pointing, the inner rings of the disc are different than every other disc. Whoops, well that's an instruction booklet. They are different from every other disc ever printed. For some reason, there are small amounts of copies of Final Fantasy VII out there where disc 3 alone, only disc 3, has multiple rings on the inside of the disc. I don't know if it maybe somehow came out of a different printing machine or whatever than all the others. But these ones are also pretty rare. I don't see these ones pop up very often. I'd say they're kind of on the same level as the double meteor copies. So everything else is pretty normal about this game, except that the disc 3s are much different. The icons, we have the high wind, we have the meteor. The icons are still the same. So there you have it. Now you can go check your collection, see your copies of Final Fantasy VII, and see if they have any of these little variants or misprints to them. I think they're just really cool, and I love sharing this kind of stuff with people. Let me know if there's any that I missed or that I maybe don't have. And if there's any that you thought were particularly cool or interesting or, you know, really enjoyed learning about, let me know in the comments below. I love sharing these things with people and getting to talk about different Final Fantasy games with people. But that's all for this video. So until the next one, take care, everyone.